I am 84 years old, and there is a mistake I made in 1973 that still finds a way to wake me before the sun comes up. It was not something that appeared in the newspapers. It did not bring the police to my door. It did not destroy my life all at once. It was worse in another way, because it seemed small enough to ignore. My name is Warren Miller, and for many years I told myself that every man needs to swallow certain truths to keep peace in the family, at work, and within his own conscience. I thought silence was maturity, that waiting was prudence, and that some conversations could be left for later, when there was more calm. But there is something cruel about certain mistakes. They only show their true price when there is no longer anyone in front of you to hear what you should have said. And before I tell you exactly what happened on that night in 1973, I need you to understand how an ordinary man in an ordinary house can destroy something precious without realizing he is doing it. In 1973, I lived in a small house in Columbus, Ohio, with a narrow porch, a cramped garage, and a kitchen where the smell of coffee would cling to the curtains in the morning. I was 31 years old, working as a supervisor at an auto parts store, and I believed that being a good man meant showing up on time, paying the bills, and not bringing problems into the house. My wife, Helen, noticed things I pretended not to see. She didn't need to raise her voice to confront me. All she had to do was sit in silence across the table, slowly stirring her coffee with a spoon, while I read the newspaper as if the news of the world mattered more than what was happening inside our own home. Back then, I confused exhaustion with justification and pride with responsibility. I had a friend named Richard Coleman who worked with me and was always saying that no man should open certain doors unless he was ready for what he might find on the other side. I used to laugh when he said that, because it sounded like the talk of a bitter man, the kind of person who sees danger even in an ordinary Sunday afternoon. But today, I understand that some doors don't need to be opened with force. Sometimes, all it takes is spending years avoiding the doorknob. The problem was that my life seemed too normal to frighten me. The bills arrived. The radio played in the kitchen. The neighbors mowed their lawns on Saturdays, and I kept telling myself there was still time to fix what was growing in silence. That was the beginning of my mistake, believing that an ignored truth would stay small just because I didn't have the courage to face it. The great lie I told myself was simple. I said that postponing a truth did not hurt anyone. I called it patience, care, common sense, but deep down it was fear dressed up as virtue. Every time Helen tried to bring up the subject I was avoiding, I found an excuse clean enough to sound reasonable, but weak enough to rot inside me. I said I would talk after dinner, after payday, after the week became less heavy, after the children were not around, after I had the right words. But the right words never came because I was not looking for words. I was looking for a way to escape without seeming like a coward. And when a man starts hiding behind routine, he can spend years calling escape responsibility. Back then, I still believed that time fixed what we did not have the courage to touch. But time does not fix an avoided conversation, does not clean hidden guilt, does not return the moment when someone was still willing to listen. What you avoid today begins to control your life tomorrow, and I only understood that sentence when it had already become the silent law of my nights. Helen would change the subject when she realized I was about to leave the table. I kept myself busy in the garage, checking old receipts, adjusting anything on the car, as if having a tool in my hand could prove I was still a useful man. But behind that ordinary house, that ordinary job, and that repeated routine, there was a truth waiting for me since 1973, and I did exactly what many people do before losing what matters most. I pretended I still had time. The mistake happened on a Thursday night in November 1973. Light rain tapped against the kitchen window, and Helen placed a folded letter on the table that had arrived from my mother, Margaret Miller. My father, Arthur, had been in a hospital in Columbus for 3 days, and she wrote only what was necessary. He was weak, he was asking for me, and he might not have much time left. I had barely spoken to my father in almost 6 years because of an old argument involving money, pride, and harsh words. Neither of us had the humility to take back. Helen read the letter before I did and told me in a low voice that I should get in the car that very night. I remember the smell of reheated coffee, her coat hanging over the chair, and the sound of my own spoon hitting the plate because I did not want to raise my eyes. I said I would go on Saturday. I said I was tired, that the road was bad, that visiting a sick man in the middle of the night would not change anything. But the truth is, I did not want to walk into that room and be the first one to soften. Helen stood near the sink and said a sentence I have never been able to forget. Warren, sometimes someone's last day looks like nothing more than an inconvenient night to someone else. I did not go. I went upstairs, lay down without really sleeping, and let my pride decide for me. At 4:18 the morning, the phone rang, and before Helen even answered, I already knew that something inside my life had ended without me there. My father died before dawn, asking for me, and the mistake that still keeps me awake was not only failing to arrive in time, it was having time, having a warning, having a wife begging me to go, and still choosing to stay. After the funeral, I went back to Columbus, trying to act as if life had only moved into a different week. I used work as an excuse, the mortgage payment as my main concern, and routine as a wall where I could hide my face. But small things started to haunt me. The phone ringing too early, a wet road at night, a folded letter on any table. My mother, Margaret, never accused me directly. Maybe that was what hurt the most. She simply looked at me with a quiet sadness, as if she knew that no words of hers could wound me more than what I was already carrying. When I went to her house weeks later, I found my father's coat still hanging behind the door, and for the first time I understood that pride does not end when the argument is over. It remains sitting in the room, taking the place of the one who left. For years, I tried to turn that Thursday into a sequence of justifications. I said I was tired, that the news had been vague, that no one could know for certain that it would be his last night. But the truth always came back the same way, simple and cruel. I did not go because I wanted to win a dispute that no longer mattered. And when I finally realized that, there was no hospital room anymore. No more voice of my father. No more Saturday. Helen stayed by my side, but something in her changed after that night. She began looking at me as if she had seen a side of me that I myself had avoided recognizing. It was not a marriage destroyed all at once, but a new silence entered between us, a silence heavier than any argument. And I learned too late that some people do not need to abandon you for distance to begin. They only need to realize that, in the decisive moment, your pride spoke louder than your love. Years later, I met Franklin Carter, a retired mechanic who lived 2 streets away from me. He had gone almost 20 years without speaking to his son Daniel because of an argument one Christmas, and he always said he would call when the boy lowered his head first. Franklin died at 72, with his son's number written on a piece of paper inside his wallet. When Daniel showed up at the funeral, he stood near the coffin, unable to really cry, because sometimes the pain doesn't come only from the loss. It comes from realizing that 2 people spent years waiting for the other to do what both of them wanted. I also remember Dorothy Hayes, a widowed teacher who attended the same church as Helen. She hid a truth from her sister Anne about the sale of the old family home, believing that revealing it would cause more suffering than silence. When Dorothy finally decided to tell her, Anne was already too ill to understand everything. That was when I realized my mistake was not rare. Many people spend their lives calling it protection when, deep down, it is fear of facing a difficult conversation before time closes the door. I did not become a better man overnight. I still had pride, fear, and difficulty admitting when I was wrong, but I stopped calling silence prudence whenever an important conversation frightened me. I started with small things. When Helen became too quiet, I asked what was wrong instead of escaping to the garage. When my mother wanted to talk about the past, I stayed seated, even when every memory made me feel smaller. I also reached out to people I had left waiting. I called Thomas Reed, an old friend I had pushed away over a foolish offense, and I wrote a letter to Richard Coleman saying that I finally understood what he had been trying to warn me about back then. None of that brought my father back, and it would be a lie to say I found peace. But those actions stopped the same mistake from continuing to multiply, because some repairs do not erase the past. They only keep you from destroying the future the same way. Today, when someone tells me they are waiting for the right moment to ask for forgiveness, visit someone, tell the truth, or end an old fight, I feel a chill in my chest. Because almost every regret begins that way, looking like a prudent, polite, reasonable decision. So I need to ask honestly, are you satisfied with the life you are protecting? What are you postponing because you are afraid of looking weak, wrong, or inconvenient? And what really matters when the years go by and you realize that winning an argument does not bring a person back? Do not wait for some great courage to fall from the sky. Pick up the phone, write the letter, schedule the visit, say the difficult sentence with respect, but say it. Some conversations do not need to be perfect. They only need to happen while there is still someone on the other side to hear them. I spent decades learning that pride always looks strong in the beginning and always looks useless in the end. If there is someone your heart mentions before you fall asleep, maybe that is the person you should not leave for Saturday, because an ordinary day can be the last warning life will ever give you. Today, at 84 years old, I still wake up some nights thinking about that Thursday in 1973. I don't think only about my father Arthur in that hospital room. I think about the man I was, sitting at home, trying to prove something that no longer had any value. If there is a phone call you know you need to make it today. If there is a truth that needs to be spoken calmly, say it today. If there is forgiveness trapped behind pride, don't wait for life to turn that person into a photograph on the table. I regret it to this day because I had a warning I had time, and still I chose to stay. If this story made sense to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it before it's too late. Comment below and subscribe to Last Hour, because some nights of guilt begin with decisions that seemed too small to matter.